All right, welcome everybody to tonight's President's Debate. As a few points of just general, things you need to know, is there are two stand-up, whatever you want to call them. There's just two stand-ups with a QR code that you can scan to be able to register, and that'll enter you into the drawing to win the prizes for tonight, as well as there will be audience questions at the end of the question and answers that I have. And so be thinking as we're going throughout the course of tonight of questions that you can ask these candidates. There'll be about 10 minutes, so it'll be on a first come, first served basis. So with that being said, good evening everybody. My name, from Douglas and Lincoln to Parker and Roosevelt, to Carter and Reagan, to Obama and McCain, to Biden and Trump, the presidential debate has been a pillar for Americans to gain insight as to the stances of the candidates seeking the position. It could safely be said these debates have majorly impacted and maybe even determined the outcome of who would be president based on a democratic process of election. Well, here at Utah State University, we have chosen this year to take the same approach. My name is Dexton Lake, and I have been asked to moderate this debate tonight. I've held 3 positions in USA student government. I've seen candidates with lofty goals who seek to flatter the students of USU to pursue the vote. And I've also seen others who actively and actually do the job and do it well. Tonight, we are going to find out through actual debate, not just question and answers, but actual debate, who is going to represent this institution best as a candidate. Audience, please remember that you can change your vote at any time between now and before the polls close. So if you are watching tonight and decide you want to switch candidates, you have the availability to do so. So please remember to register at your QR codes, and those who are watching online can do so at vote.usu.edu. You can change your votes there as well as register for this event. Let's welcome our candidates. First, to my left, we have Mr. Eric Focht. Let's give him a round of applause. And second to my right, we have Mr. Lucas Stevens. Let's give him a round of applause. Gentlemen, we welcome you to this debate. We're excited to have you. We're excited that you have made it to the final election process. The focus of tonight will be to highlight your specific plans, learn of what you plan to accomplish, and how you intend to leave USU a better place than when you found it. We will be highlighting your platform, topics discussed in other debates, and positions you have taken on particular subjects. These questions will be hard, and they are meant to be so. We've reviewed these with several people, and these are actively some of the hardest questions we've asked in a debate. You have tablets in front of you in order to take notes on the responses of your opponent, and the structure will be as follows. There will be 3 segments lasting 15 minutes each, thereabouts. The topics are platforms, current USA events and issues, and the third will be specific questions catered to you. Then we will have about 10 minutes of audience questions, unless there's more or less. For each topic, I will ask a candidate a question and allow 2 minutes for a response. You have 2 minutes. At the conclusion of the 2 minutes, the opposing candidate will get to rebuttal the answer or add insight from their perspective for 1 minute. To eliminate fluff, we would ask that you be direct with your answers. If I fail in the first 30 seconds, you haven't answered the question, I will redirect your attention to the question asked as a moderator should. You are kept to these hard times, and at a 30-second mark, I will hit my gavel once just to mark that you're at your 30-second mark, and then at the 2-minute mark, when your 2 minutes is up, I will interrupt you, and that will be the conclusion of your statement. And we will keep to that time frame, so brevity is key. At the conclusion of the hour, you will have 2 minutes to give closing thoughts. Since we've had 2 previous debates, we agreed an introduction would not be necessary. With that being said, let's debate. Our first question is for Eric, and you have 2 minutes. Your platform mirrors previous presidential candidates' platforms over the years by mentioning increasing efforts to increase inclusion, involvement opportunities, etc. You've used words like bridging the gap, raising awareness, increasing retention, and mobilizing. What 3 specific plans do you have to take a common platform and actually do something different than your presidential predecessors have done? Your time starts when you start.
Hey, thank you. So yeah, first of all, I want to just say thanks for all being here, but I just want to say that first of all, there's nothing wrong with taking a platform from an old president or taking a point from an old president. Doesn't mean my whole platform is from old presidents, but I think there's nothing wrong from building on instead of reinventing the wheel. Second of all, I want to talk about three main points, okay? So one of the points that I want to do when it comes to inclusion is I want to start a program called Aggie Mentors. So one of those programs, and it might be run under the service center, is kind of the vision that I have for it. But basically, Aggie Mentors is a place for students to take what they've gotten out of Connections, what they've gotten out of Peer Mentor, and take it further. Because a lot of what I've been talking about and a lot of what I've been worried about for my platform is the elite culture within the third floor of the TSC and the exclusivity of involvement opportunities on campus. So for me, I feel that like students are available and they know about different opportunities, but sometimes they're not able to, they apply and everyone applies and they're not able to make it in. And there shouldn't be anything barring students. So what I'm doing is I'm going to take that and get students to have mentors who are already involved and take it a step further and get students to be able to, that will help with the retention and that will help with the community as well. The next thing that I want to do with these initiatives is I want to take with the Aggie Heroes, that's already a program, but I want to amplify that and do an Aggie Hero Scholarship so we can hear from students that are actually students, not just on the third floor of the TSC, people who have gone through hard things, and actually reward them and bringing people together in the community. And then one of the third initiatives I want to do is
Thank you, Mr. Folks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mr. Stevens, you have 1 minute to respond.
Wow. Great. So I think that when it comes to involvement, I'm the current USUSA Executive Vice President, and in my role this year, I've had the opportunity to chair the Student Fee Board. And as a part of the Student Fee Board, 7 of those members are students at large, selected from the student body. Anyone can apply, any student can apply. And I tried to diversify the application process, and admittedly we got a few applicants who were not from the involvement crowd, and that was exciting. It's easier said than done to reach out. So an actual plan for how to reach out to those who wouldn't necessarily get involved, I'd like to see that, and I would support any effort for that. I think that's an awesome, worthwhile pursuit.
All right, thank you. So our next question goes to Mr. Stevens, and he has 2 minutes. Your platform indicates that you plan to streamline USUSA organizations, promote inclusivity, and strengthen ties between USUSA and inclusion organizations, that you'll effectively advocate for all students, all while drawing on past experiences. Yet, when asked what you did this year for USUSA, you said your door was always open and that you weren't an event planner, indicating students had to come find you rather than the reverse. Why is it the students' responsibility to come to you, and how do you plan to do things differently than you have done this year? Your time starts when you start. And as a reference, there's always the question behind you if you need to reflect back.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the president and the executive vice president are 2 pretty different roles. The executive vice president's responsibilities are largely behind the scenes and bureaucratic. You know, me going to faculty senate meetings and curriculum committee meetings and sitting on tuition review committee and going to academic senate, right? These committee meetings aren't super exciting things that hot topic issues. I view the president as more of a visible leader. So I guess how I would do things differently would be inherent in the responsibilities, in the responsibility shift. The president runs the Aggie Blue Leadership Conference, which is an incoming conference a conference for 200 incoming freshmen on a usual year, out in front of freshmen. Presidents, except when notable figures come and visit the university, they greet them. It's a lot more of a visible position, but as well, a lot more students come to the president with issues, whereas a lot of students came to me with like student fee issues, such as the Aggie Blue Bikes fee last week. But
So how do you plan to reach out to students?
okay, I think the Aggie Blue, I think the Aggie Blue Leadership Conference is a big one, reaching out to incoming freshmen. Again, that's I would appoint a good PR and marketing director to reach students. That's their job.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Folks, you can respond to that question, and you have 1 minute to do so.
So yes, one of the things that he talked about was that he felt like the positions were more bureaucratic, and he felt like everything was all about the bureaucracy here with all the committee meetings and everything he has to do with the new rewrite of the Constitution, which has already been rewritten, by the way, and who has been claimed that there is no interference from the writing of the Constitution by Lucas Stevens, as said in all of his presentations so far. But going forward, it says that there is they will be able to give some of the responsibilities from the president, those committee meetings that don't really have to be there to the new position that's created, a new Logan position, VP. So we don't need as much of a bureaucratic leader anymore. We need a leader who actually knows the people and knows their concerns and is going to take it to them. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next question is for Mr. Fogt. Let me make sure I'm on the right one. I apologize. You indicate you are going to create, quote, a more enriching and worthwhile experience for student development and success during COVID-19. This, close quote, this pandemic has affected students broadly in many different ways. This pandemic and the university response goes far beyond just one person, that person being you when you wrote that goal, and also were you to become the nominee. So, what is your specific plan to accomplish this platform goal, and what exactly do you have in mind when you wrote it, as COVID-19 will likely still affect all of USU into the next year? Your time starts when you start.
Hey, thank you for the question, because I think my point for that last point of my platform and the goal not only has to do my other points that lead up to that goal has to also do with this goal. And so a lot of this goal has to do with the fact that the plans that I have to change for getting students involved and in creating student events. I think one thing though for COVID specifically is that I felt and I've met with several people who also feel that with the student events office right now, there is a possibility to have up to at least 100 people at an event if the procedures are taken right. If things are taken right and they have the time to get it approved, and then they can do it safely. But right now, they're not taking advantage of all the people that could possibly come to an event, and oftentimes they put an event online just to save time, maybe, I don't know. But not all the events are not putting the work into it to actually to let as many students as can safely possibly go attend. So I want to put in the work, as well as my president's cabinet especially, and have people over that who are helping as many students be able to go to these student events instead of wasting their student fees.
So how do you plan to do that safely?
So the plan is we have the procedures already made under the committee and the safety committee. It's just the work is not being necessarily put into getting the venues in time necessarily maybe, or being able to do what it takes to get the forms filled out and approved in time. And another thing that is that it takes a lot of work to get the safety procedures ready and to get everything ready for an event that has 100 people or 200 people. So maybe maybe it's easier to put it online, but then the attendance is low and fees aren't being utilized.
Thank you, Mr. Fogt. Mr. Stevens, you also touched lightly on your COVID-19 response in your platform, so you have 1 minute to respond to that similar question.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Eric made great points. I thought, we really can. I feel like a student body president can have a huge impact on bringing back, events and traditions that we love. I think, the student body president sits on a lot of the university's COVID boards, which is where a lot of the decision making takes place in regards to the precautions that we're taking on a university level. And I would work really hard to disseminate that knowledge to the students actually planning the events. I think that could be really helpful in getting events approved, as well being a professional, effective advocate on those boards. If there's one thing I've learned from my position this year, it's that administrators respond to students being professional and making coherent, sound arguments.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Stevens, this next question is for you, and you have 2 minutes to answer. Your platform stresses a more inclusive experience at USU, similarly mirroring predecessors' platforms. You have served in the USUSA for a year now. You said you have excellent relationships with administrators. What have you done for inclusivity this year, and what and why should students expect differently for next year, utilizing your excellent relationship with administrators should you become the nominee?
Great question. So as far as what I've worked on with inclusivity this year, I mentioned how I was in charge of appointing 7 students at large to the student fee board. I made sure to include someone from every college. I tried to include those with diverse backgrounds and diversity in a lot of different areas. As well, this summer when at the death of George Floyd and the kind of resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, many USUSA officers felt like we needed to make a statement. I was on board with that, and I submitted a draft that ended up taking a largely different shape. But I was on board with that, and I think we need to establish. I've brought up it's kind of a moot point since we've got a new constitution now, but we need to establish a better way to make public statements as a student association, and that's something I hope to establish in the new constitution. And as far as relationships with administrators, just having been in office for a year, you learn a lot about who to go to for what. You learn a lot about what's already being done on the university level. I love to hear all the great intentions and ideas that candidates have when running for office. And as somebody who has ran for office before and been elected, a lot of the times when you step into office, you find out, oh, well, that's already being done over here. And we can't do that because of this, this, and this, once you're presented with all the information. So my goals are very realistic. I know what I'm getting myself into, and I know we can accomplish these goals in a year, because that's another
Thank you,
thing
Mr.
to
Stevens.
consider.
All right, Mr. Folk, you have 1 minute to respond.
Okay, guys, this just goes back to Lucas's response in the last debate, if anyone was there, when he was asked what he did outside of his charter to help. And nothing was mentioned except for Aggie Blue Bikes, which he got a lot of emails that were answered not necessarily by him specifically, but were sent to several administrators. And that doesn't say that sitting on a board means he actually made a difference with those changes, and he didn't say that he did. Another thing was that looking at his platform points from last year, accessibility to CAPS has not changed. It actually got worse. And now it's a whole semester wait time. Nothing specifically has changed to help campus safety, which was on his platform. And there is no tailoring to new students to get involved. Nothing has changed, and that's even on his platform again this year, so that means he didn't do anything about it last year.
Thank you. And at the conclusion of this segment, I would like each of you to take 1 minute and tell us specifically, so you each have the same question, why your platform is the superior platform relative to your opponent, and why students should choose your platform when voting, starting with Mr. Folk.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. So with my platform, a lot of my platform deals with using and utilizing the resources we have on campus. utilizing things we're already getting started. Like we have they've already investing in new software for reinventing for awareness for campus, and so I want to work with them to do that. I have good communication, and everything is already in plans for things we want to do, and things that aren't in plans, I have specific structure. I've had a research and development team and working on these for months, so we're ready to use them. Oh, is that my 30 seconds?
That's your 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. And so we've had a research and development team and working for months on these plans, looking at other schools and what they've done with COVID, what they've done with diversity, I've met with all the diversity organizations, and I've done the research that it takes to be able to get ready to implement this. I've also had 2 appeals for parking that I've done just as a normal student that have been
Thank you,
passed.
Mr. Fogue. All right, and now we turn to Mr. Stevens for 1 minute.
I think it's important to note that there are action items associated with each of my platform points. So actual change will come from it. And as I mentioned before, these are new things. These are things that aren't already being done. This will result in actual change. Having been in office before, I know what's going on. This is actually going to change things. And as well, kind of the main point and my main priority would be revitalizing the college experience. I've had a survey that I've had over 300 students take, and almost everyone has said that the number one priority is the most important issue to them is university COVID response. This has affected everyone. So I think having a good stance that's for all students in that regard is most beneficial.
Thank you. Let's give these gentlemen a round of applause for their first round. I told you these would be invigorating questions. So, at the conclusion of the first round, I'd like to remind our audience and those watching online that they can change their votes at any time and to please register using our QR codes and the link online. So, going into our next segment, we will be talking about current USA events and issues. And we will start with Mr. Stevens. So you have 2 minutes to answer the following question. There has been and will continue to be restructuring of student fees at Utah State University. In the last couple of weeks, a cut to Aggie Blue Bikes required restructuring of parking pass fees. The student sustainability fee was cut and moved to a different monetary source. As COVID-19 continues, there may be continual budget cuts which require movement and cutting of student fees. Were you to be president, how would you address the restructuring of student fees, and were you to be put in the position of suggesting a cut, which student fee or student fees would you cut, with none not being a reasonable answer? And we've given you the list of student fees in front of you for reference, and your time starts when you start.
Yeah, so I've been in these meetings and the tuition review committee meetings. I've chaired the student fee board this last year. When you really look at the information of the student fee restructuring, when you see all the information, you realize how great of a thing it really is. That student fees that really should be tuition are being moved over to tuition. And those are largely university employees' salaries, and the state's going to cover 75% of those when they're moved over to tuition. And that's as a result of an audit that the state did on all universities this last summer. So as far as working with the fee restructuring, I think it's important to note that there is a big learning curve. There's a big learning curve with every position when you come in, and having chaired the student fee board, I will not say that I know everything about every fee, but there will be less of a learning curve when it comes to making proposals on possible cuts. As well, I should have mentioned before as well that fees remained flat this year, and the student fee board was not aware of this information when we recommended an increase to the ARC fee. So when it came back that from the trustees that the fees were to remain flat, and this is going to be a foreseeable thing or indefinite thing.
So in
President
about
Coffin
your
said.
last 20 seconds, which fee would you suggest cutting should the need arise next year?
Okay. So a fee that I suggested in the tuition review committee when we had this conversation, so I guess I've already kind of had this experience, I suggested looking at the technology fee, in that I've worked for the computer labs and I've
Thank
worked
you.
a lot with
All right, Mr. Folk, you have 1 minute to respond, and just to remind you, you're covering your knowledge of the student fee structuring, as well as which fee you would cut. Your minute starts when you start.
Okay, sweet. First of all, I just want to say I've also been on the student fee board in the past. And just because you chair a student fee board doesn't mean you know more than the person who attends it. You're just telling them person when they should speak or not speak. So I know just as much about the student fee board just by being an attendant. Second, I think for the Aggie blue bikes and different things, I just want to be careful with students' money because I care about students. And I don't want to set bad precedences. So the thing about the parking pass is kind of scary because maybe they'll use it in other ways further on. And so, yeah.
So about 30 seconds, which one would
You
you
always
cut?
scare me with that one.
Sorry.
And then if I were to cut any student fee, right now with COVID, 17,000 students or more are paying a student athletics fee for games only 400 people can attend. And so that's not fair. And so what I would do is I would temporarily
But how would you argue when athletics says that when athletics brings so much revenue to the university?
Well, one thing that I would do is there'd still be revenue. What we do is we'd have students have $7. There'll be a student tickets that are reduced ticket fees. And so for students that want to go, they
Thank
can
you,
go
Mr.
and
Pope.
pay for that student reduced fee instead of making everyone pay.
All right, we will now go to Mr. Folk for his 2-minute question. Aside from mental health and coronavirus, what are 3 issues facing Utah State University students, and what are your specific plans to address those issues? And your time starts when you start.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Aside from mental health and coronavirus. Okay, sounds good. Well, there's a lot of things that are going on with students right now. I think one of the big problems is, and unfortunately all the problems that happen sometimes are interconnected or interrelated. And so I think a lack of awareness of opportunities for students on campus has led to bad retention rates, as well as a bad, I guess, Aggie experience that they have and feeling like they need to drop out or move because they don't have opportunities to get involved or are aware of these opportunities.
What kind of opportunities?
Everything. The service center, the student involvement center, everything. Like the department, the research, the internships, the scholarships. I applied for a scholarship that wasn't applied for 4 semesters, and they gave me the money for the whole year, or the fast one, because no one applied. Literally, all these things are also contribute to mental health in different ways. So like I said, it's interconnected, because students who are involved feel like they have more of a purpose on campus. They feel like they have more meaning in their lives, and they feel like their tuition is worth more. I have a lot of friends, and especially the survey that I've also taken with over 300 people, talk a lot about how involvement opportunities aren't being utilized, and that they didn't know about anything, that they would be willing to if they were to do this. They would be willing to if they were to know about these opportunities, but also opportunities and involvement lead to a community. Everyone who's in an involvement opportunity is also all of a sudden open up to a community of people that have support. And so we say we're the Aggie family. We say we are the school with the most involvement. We're a land-grant university. Students don't feel that, and they're transferring to schools that are cheaper because they don't feel like they're getting any experiences outside of their classroom, which they can get at other places like UVU or Dixie, which are cheaper.
Thank you. And Mr. Stevens, we understand that you have a shorter amount of time, so just give us what you can. You don't necessarily need to meet the 3 point, but to that end, what, aside from mental health and coronavirus, do you feel like are the issues facing Utah State, and what are your plans to address them? And your minute starts when you start.
Yeah, I think, there's academic associated challenges, financial challenges, and safety challenges would probably be the 3. So let's just talk about safety for a second, because that was in my platform last year and that was brought up earlier. So this year I've sat on the Utah System of Higher Education Campus Safety Board, which was a really cool opportunity to learn more about what's going on at the state level, and give input there as far as campus safety legislation and changes. And I had an opportunity to meet with the director of the Safe UT app, and in a restructuring of its marketing campaign. And I think we'll be hearing a lot more about the Safe UT app. Just one of the suggestions I made was incorporating it into the mandatory bystander trainings that we'll have to go through due to the
Thank you, Mr.
Title IX
Stevens.
changes.
Okay, now back to you, Mr. Stevens, for your 2-minute question. There has been a restructuring of USUSA, including serious edits to the current Constitution, which you were initially critical of. These edits, included representing These edits included representing USU Eastern as the sole, and bringing them in to have one university-wide student body president. As the last president to run under the current structure of USUSA, what 3 things are you going to do to ensure the rights and opinions of all USU campuses are represented to the administration and the Board of Trustees? And if you need me to restate that, I can, because I kind of stumbled through it.
That's okay. No, great question. I feel like I need to clarify. I wasn't initially critical of this new constitution. Any criticism I made was about the way it went about and the lack of input that all officers had into it. So that would be my first point, was in ensuring that all students are represented, would be consulting all student government leaders and all students in decisions. So ensure that the Student Affairs Office will send out surveys a lot to gauge student opinion, ensuring that those are sent to statewide campuses and online students, as well working with statewide campus representatives. This is something I've done as a part of my campaign, and I've reached out to the statewide campus president, talked about their issues. That would be something I would continue to do, go to the statewide executive council meetings regularly. As well, another thing that I think could be really cool, and this was actually discussed at Staters Council, is to put into, so with the new structure, with the new constitution, we're going to be rewriting everybody's charter. So every officer is basically going to have to rewrite the responsibilities associated with their position. Along with that, a suggestion was made from Staters Council, which is made up of deans and upper administration, to include in officers' charters to have statewide or online students represented on those councils. And I think that's an exciting opportunity and something we can definitely do with Zoom being so readily utilized now.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Folk, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, he's been talking a lot about, and we've been hearing a lot about today, all the people he's been able to meet, all these higher up people he's been able to meet. And so that just means he knows a lot. It doesn't mean he's done anything, and you can tell, and he has not done anything. We need action. He also said a lack of input. He was concerned about that. Then why can I take many, many witnesses and say of people who said that he visited their classes or their presentations, and he said he had a huge part in writing or not a huge part, but had a part in writing.
So what are you going to do for the students across the campuses?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have liaisons on my president's cabinet within each university to work under the VPs of the different universities, because they're all the colleges. Universities or statewide campuses? Sorry, statewide campus. Thank you, Dexton. Of the statewide campuses, because since they will all be a part of under the USUSA, and they will have a part in voting and running, I think we should have more communication.
Okay. On to Mr. Vogt. As president, you will sit on many university committees and the Board of Trustees. When you vote on those decisions, you will face policy decisions that may have split opinion among students. What spectrum of decision-making will you use to vote on important university issues when you sit on the university committees and board of trustees? And how will you prepare yourself to face and respond to backlash about the decisions from students and possible other student government leaders that you made?
That's a long question. Can you specify what you mean by spectrum of decision?
What decision-making process will you use?
Okay, thank you. So first of all, to kind of address part of the question, it does not, I think the big thing is that a leader and a person who is a good leader is not a person who does not make mistakes. Because we do have to make lots of important decisions, every leader has made mistakes. And everyone's going to make mistakes. And it's about being willing to make calculated decisions, and then if you made the wrong decision, owning up to that decision. And saying, look, I was wrong, taking criticism from people that may not understand the situation and feel like you did a wrong thing. But using the advice from the counselors who've been here for 10 plus years and not only relying on my own experience, I think will be huge in this. And so I think I will be able to make decisions that are calculated. And the way that I'll do that is using the advisors and the people who are on the council, as well as the executive council, as well as other students at large, to be able to make these decisions and have informed decision making. But when I make these decisions, to not be afraid of making them just because there's a possibility of mistake, but to make them, and if I make a mistake, own up to it, ask for advice, and move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, you have 1 minute to respond.
I think as far as when it comes to how to making decisions, I think it's important to just consider the student perspective first and consider all students. And I've been in meetings this year, and in my role this year, I know there's been criticisms that I might seem like detached, but really, in reality, considering all students has been a big part of my job this year, and that's something I would continue to do. As far as facing backlash, I think instituting maybe some town halls or more formats where we can provide more information to students, because I feel like oftentimes
Following question. Generally, students have complained there is a disconnect between the student body and student government. There was no academic legislation passed this year, and there were no initiatives proposed by either of you to improve this disconnected student experience, though it still gets mentioned every year. In your first few weeks in office, what do you plan to do to improve this disconnect, and what, if anything, have you started already? And we will start with VP Stevens, and you have 1 minute.
You're right in saying that this is brought up every year, and in all reality, I think that student government, an engineering student taking 18 credits isn't very likely to want to go join Blue Crew. Is just the reality. Just inherent in the system. Student government attracts a certain kind of student. As far as but we can make it friendlier. We can make it more inclusive. So I want to institute an inclusion training at Aggie Blue. Again, that conference for incoming freshmen, and I think that can have a good culture shift for, these are the future leaders of the university for years to come, and planting it in their mind of inclusion, training on inclusion from the very beginning. I think that's a
Thank you, Mr.
good action
Stevens.
point.
Okay, Mr. Folk, you have 1 minute.
Yes, Aggie Blue is a good thing, but it only reaches 100 or so students. We need to be reaching out a lot more. And I've gone to a lot of classes and asked how many of you know what my voice is. 90% of them don't know. We only get a few every month, and a lot of them are, where's the registrar's office? So we need to actually be actively engaged in seeking opinion. And with the new restructuring of the Constitution, the president will have more time to be able to focus on these initiatives. So one thing, I met with President Cockett couple weeks ago, and we discussed new initiatives that we could possibly do to seek student opinion. And we decided to take back an old initiative from Michael Scott Peters called Parfaits with the President, where we'll have food, we're both there, and we're able to talk to students in a safe environment, as well as we've both been able to implement the surveys. But let's actually get more access to the student survey that's sent out by the university and actually look at this data on a consistent basis and use my team, my PCAP, to be able to
Thank you, Mr.
take
Pope.
action.
Let's give these gentlemen a round of applause. That concludes that segment. And for a third time, we want to remind everybody two things: to please register at the QR codes or online. If you're listening online, we hope you are. As well as, if you feel so inclined to change your vote, you can up until the polls close tomorrow. Okay, we'll move on to our third segment and this will be our final segment before we move on to audience questions. And these questions were written directly for you, for each of you, regarding your platform or different things that you've brought up in campaigns or debates or just throughout the year or the time that you've been running. So these have been catered to you. And our first question goes to Mr. Fogue. President Noel Cockett relies heavily on this position and requires a high degree of trust. These last 2 years have been some of the best years of that necessary relationship. How are you prepared to continue that relationship, and how will you address disagreements with her? Because guaranteed you will have disagreements with her. And your time starts when you start.
First of all, I just want to say it's so nice of you to tailor these questions for us. No, one of the things that I've met with her on a couple student opinion things I've worked on just as a student. So the fact that she's willing to do that shows a lot of her collaboration and skills. I know that, like, for me, not only am I going to put the time commitment into this, I don't plan to have any jobs or anything that would, like, put me away from putting all the time into this position. I plan to be able to work until it goes, and everyone who knows me knows that I'm a hard worker. I'll go till 5 or 6 in the morning for weeks, working and getting stuff done that I want to get done. But one of the big things is, if we do have these disagreements, me and Noel, President Cockett, sorry, me and President Cockett will be able to, if we do have these disagreements, then I'll have to take it, and if I still feel like that it is what the students need, I'm not going to just shy back because it's the main line of authority. I'm going to find ways to appeal to different processes and send it to the boards, move it up to the boards to a pact where, okay, we've been voted on, we've been majoritied, and even though she disagrees, I've still been able to push forward the thing that I feel like will be the best thing for students. And in the end, I am a student. As much as Noel Cockett, President Cockett, wants to know the student's opinion, sometimes it's better for a person who's a student to be able to help push that forward.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, you have 1 minute to respond.
I think Sammy helped write this question. What's the best 2 years? Anyway, okay, never mind. That did land. That was not a good joke. I think as far as handling disagreements with President Cockett, I think just relying on logic and not getting upset, not going after her is probably a big one. Not letting things get personal. I'm pretty good at. I've been in a lot of rough situations with people being contentious, and I think just focusing on logic and the task at hand is important. And going back to what I said earlier, it's really about the students and keeping students in mind. And I really think that President Cockett has that. That's her intention, and that would be mine too.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Stevens, we will move on to you. The student body president is privy to information and insights that a majority of students might not understand. How are you prepared to address and respond to disagreements of your constituents, your fellow officers, and the student body at large? And you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because it brings up kind of the dual role of student government. in that we are representatives of students to administration, but also in some ways, we're tasked with administration to disseminate knowledge to students. I think being active on social media would be a good thing. I think using student media would be really, really good. I think the Statesman and Aggie Radio are underutilized resources. I wrote an opinion column for the Statesman at the beginning of fall semester, and last year I actually had a talk show on Aggie Radio with a buddy of mine. It was a great time. So utilizing student media to disseminate information and do it in a qualitative way that can really explain some of the more minute details. I think that would be really helpful. But as well, utilize, and I mean, I said this at the beginning, but having a good working relationship with the PR and marketing director of USUSA.
So how will you address disagreements in general, even with the information being sent out? How will you address disagreements?
Okay, thanks for refocusing. Yeah, I think that, I mean, having conversations, like I've met with students about issues this past year. That's something I would continue to do. That's something Sammy's done a really good job of this year, is taking these issues head on. Students have concerns, they can meet with me, talk about it. We can resolve things in a clear-headed, calm, logical way that won't get personal, and yeah, we can come to a common consensus.
Mr. Folk, do you have 1 minute to respond?
So to address the first one about getting the word out there, one of the things that I had thought about and already discussed was my PR and marketing director will have its own cabinet. She'll have her own people that will be working under her, and a lot of them are going to be trying to be involved with getting the people that are influencers on campus to be using their social media, because everyone knows
Is this in addition to the people who already work for PR and marketing?
Yeah, I'm an association. Yeah, so we'll be reaching out to these influencers, and what we'll be doing is we'll be having them, because everyone knows that like it's the people on campus that on social media that have all the followers that will get the word out to people. People are using Instagram, and I mean, I want to help student media to improve, but less people are reading the Statesman or listening to Aggie Radio than they are watching people that are doing random things on Instagram. They're influencers. So let's get those influencers actually talking about real issues and getting the word out to students using promotions.
Thank you. All right. Our next question is from Mr. Fogt. People have expressed concern, People have expressed concern around your professionalism, your capability to address the gravity of important issues, and your ability to connect with administrators. How do you address those concerns, and how will you make those necessary connections and changes if required?
Hey, thank you.
And you have 2 minutes.
Well, one of the things, if we want to talk about this, is the experience I've already been able to have with professionals. So in my time in GRC, I've been able to work, and I was one of the head student lobbyists on the team. We had initiatives for mental health as well as initiatives for sustainability that I was able to meet with over 40 different representatives and senators at the state, all personally in their offices, and those initiatives were successfully passed. Not only that, but I've met with President Cockett before this to talk about issues that I felt were important. I've met with James Morales and passed different parking initiatives, and I've also met with different people and done that. So I think the big thing is like that it doesn't have to be a bureaucracy. People don't have to be some big elusive leader to be a successful leader. You don't have to be someone who's dressed in a nice suit and tie at all times to be someone that people respect. They respect you for who you are as a person. They respect you for the connections you're able to make. And if you're talking about connections, the key word there, we're talking about someone who cares about the people that they're talking with, cares about the issues, cares about the students they're trying to advocate for. So less of bureaucracy, but people will be able to see genuine intentions.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, I think that, having already existing relationships with administrators is just going to be helpful to all students. Really having those connections already built, having that institutional knowledge already there that I have, I can just come in, there will be less of a learning curve, we can get going, we can accomplish our tasks. That's good for all students. Yeah, nothing more, yeah, that's enough. Nothing much more to say.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is for you, Mr. Stevens. People run in USA under the pretense that they are more qualified than another candidate solely because they have been more involved in student government than an opponent. We've seen in the last couple of years that someone who served as president, as Sami Ahmed has served very effectively in USA without previous experience. Besides just chairing positions or being executive VP, why are you qualified, and how do we eliminate the notion only those previously involved can do the job?
Oh, I don't think that's an accurate notion at all. I don't think that being a vice president is necessary to be the president. And I think that in reality, yeah, Sami did do a great job his first year, and I think he did an even better job his second year as president. That's when he was able to pass a new constitution. And this is brought up every year, and I think it's valid to a degree that we need fresh blood in USA. We need fresh ideas, new people, and I think that's very valid. But at the same time, someone who knows what's going on, who has been in a position, is really just an asset to students, and can, someone who has relationships with advisors, has worked with administrators before, can really come in and make big changes like a new constitution, consolidating USU Eastern into our student association. So in reality, it's not necessary to have been a vice president before. I don't think so, but it's just helpful.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Folk, since this was tailored to Mr. Stevens, since you don't have that experience, how do you find yourself qualified for the job? And you have 1 minute to respond.
So for someone who believes it is not necessary, you've done nothing but talk about your positions and not your actions this whole meeting. And one thing that I would talk about is, let's not forget, and not only Sami, who's done 2 years, but Michael Scott Peters and Jaron before him, who have done great things for the university. For me, I feel like not only does that show, but I think I also have qualifications that are diversified. We need someone, it's been a while since the university, every president has something different that they do, a different style. Sami's has been good, effective, working with the administrators and before. But for me, I feel like it's time, and it's been a long time since we've had a person who is energetic and charismatic, and during COVID-19, that's something we need. We need someone who's willing to go out there and be a voice of the students and get people excited about student events. Everyone is in a lull. Everyone that doesn't want to go to student events or go to classes even.
Thank
be
you.
In school.
Let's give these gentlemen a round of applause. That concludes our scripted questions that we had for tonight, but we are still going to do about 10 minutes worth of audience questions. And so if you have one, there is a microphone right here, and you are more than welcome to go up and ask your question. If there's a delayed period, we'll just conclude the evening. But if your question for the candidates, if the question's directed to you, we'll give you 2 minutes to answer the question, and then we won't turn any time over to the other opponent. If it's for both of you, we'll give you each 1 minute. Okay? So we will now open it up for audience questions, and if anybody starts filing up there, I would like to remind you for a 4th time to register at the QR codes, and then online, if you're online, there's a link on the vote.usu.edu, and then if you want to change your vote, you can. So, audience questions, be there any?
I have a question for both candidates. My question is, what does it mean to be a proactive leader, and how will you proactively lead the student body out of our COVID-19 emotional and mental recession and into a vibrant community life with specific action plans?
Okay, since that was directed to both candidates, we'll give you each 1 minute, and we'll start with you, Mr. Fogue.
Okay. So thank you, Ellie, for that question. One of the things that I wanted to talk about and what I want to do to help with the lull that we're talking about here and the thing that we've been in is we want to get students feeling like things are back to normal. So not only am I taking and working with the university to take the website and getting all the involvement opportunities into one site and the one thing so everyone will be more involved this next semester, all the orientations, all of the connections classes and everything that students, when they first come to school, there's going to be more trainings on involvement opportunities. And so that students are aware of these opportunities and are able to get involved. And so once we do that, we're going to make it fun by what I talked about earlier, making sure we're utilizing as many people as can come to the events as possible and not just putting events online. But as things are going forward and getting less, COVID's getting less serious, we're able to have more students. Let's utilize that and their fees.
Mr. Stevens, you have 1 minute.
So I think as far as what it means to be a proactive leader, someone who's responsible, energetic, smart, as well, I think a really good indicator of being proactive is the influence you have on other people. How do you make other people feel? Do you inspire others? And a specific action plan is how I want to use President's Cabinet. So I was on Jaren's President's Cabinet my freshman year, did a lot of different things there that we don't have time to talk about. But how I want to structure it is have a number of directors and with subcommittees, and directors can apply to the President's Cabinet with specific initiatives in mind. I don't have all the answers. I'm not the hero of the student body. Students are the heroes. And so students can apply to this. Students have great ideas. Aggies are amazing, and give them the resources to make their ideas happen.
Any other questions?
Cool. Is this on? Awesome. A question for both candidates. Let's say I'm as involved as I want to be. I'm doing great. My mental health, it's in a good spot. And I actually like COVID because some of my online classes are easier. Why am I going to be glad that I voted for you?
Mr. Stevens, we'll start with you, and you have 1 minute.
I think that a lot of the responsibilities of the student body president are behind the scenes as well. That's just the way it is in our charters. I don't know what was discussed in the last Board of Trustees meeting. Maybe somebody in the crowd does. That's where a lot of our time is spent. And in those small, detailed conversations, reviewing policy, and being in faculty meetings. So actively, I loved Ellie's word of being proactive. So proactively representing students in an effective professional way, which may or may not be seen for years to come, right? These are long impacting decisions, but representing students in a professional, effective way is good for all students in the long run when it comes to all sorts of issues.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Fogue, you're up.
Yeah, so before COVID even was a problem, or before it even existed or we knew about it, there were already problems. There are already problems happening, and there are already things to change, or else we wouldn't have a student body president every year. And so just because there's COVID doesn't mean that just changing COVID will be important. One of the problems with student opinion, as we talked about before, is not being expressed. From the surveys I've taken and from people that I've talked to, everyone seems to have an opinion. Someone has something to say, but they never feel like they know where to take their opinions. They never feel like they know what to do with them, or feel like at all that they would make a difference. And so what you'd be happy for if you voted for me is you'd be happy to see that your initiatives were actually brought to the university and that you were asked and approached for them, and that the student administration cared.
Thank you. Any other audience questions?
So my question is specifically for Eric. In response to Lucas's question about student fees, you spoke about possibly changing the price of student activities, like athletics, and I was wondering if that was just like a hypothetical or if you could expand more on what you were talking about there.
Yeah.
And you'll have 2 minutes for this since it was directed, to you.
Okay. Sweet. So what I wanted to talk about there is like, students need student fees that they're actually using, because they're called student fees, right? They're for the students. And so what we need to do is we need to evaluate, okay, which student fees are not being used by students? Which student fees are students paying for, but they're not using? It's almost like forcing someone to buy a gym pass that they never wanted to buy. You know, like you can't force someone to do that. And so what we want to do is we want to take the 17,000 students that are paying for this fee and give them a break. The ones that aren't being able to go to basketball games or do things. And so what the plan is to be able to do this. It's not necessarily meant to be, and I've as I've looked into it, it's not meant to be something that is permanent necessarily, but at least until COVID comes back and we're able to get back to where students are able to come in at mass capacities, and we're able to get back to where at least students have the ability to use their fees to what they want, then we can look into maybe implementing back what was already there. And so I think the plans we're going to be doing is we're going to use the administrators who've been here for 10 years.
So what about the assistance from the CARES Act that was given back to students to help with student fee?
Oh, yes. Okay, thank you. So that's something that, like, yeah, if we have the Student CARES Act, I mean, that's another thing, is that sometimes is given, the money that is received from the Student CARES Act sometimes isn't even distributed equally. It's given to students based on FAFSA fees and other qualifications. But for me, and for instance, I qualify for FAFSA, but I have a scholarship. And so the money was given to me, and I felt bad, because I was like, I don't need this as much as another student.
Thank you. Any other audience questions?
Hi, Lucas. Hi, Eric. I know both of you pretty well. So my question, and I'll preface it with the importance for me is like the Aggie family. The reason why I came to Utah State, I'm a junior, by the way, was because I visited it when my brother was here and really felt connected to the campus. And, you know, if you go online, you can see the salaries for the Utah State employees. Noel Cockett makes over $500,000. VP Morales makes over $300K. They're not getting paid the big bucks to let you guys run the school. I know you guys, whatever initiatives you have, they'll be important, and it might affect, you might make some change, but for me, how have you guys in the past year done something individually to affect the Aggie family in a positive way?
All right, since that was directed at both questions, you each get a minute, and we'll start with with Mr. Stevens.
So I was actually on President's Cabinet with Nate and with Kenny and freshman year, and he also helped me on my campaign last year. So one of my big points was mental health, and I was improving the mental health on campus. And when you get in this position, you realize how much the CAPS office is really doing when it comes to the promotion of mental health or mental health resources. And one new resource that I was able to find, or one new way to use the CAPS office, was bringing a therapist into our academic senate meetings, and then offering that resource to every senator's council and departmental clubs within colleges. And that was pretty widely used, these
Thank you, Mr.
workshops
Stevens.
from CAPS.
Okay, Mr. Fogue, you're up. And you have 1 minute.
Okay, so talking about mental health, I'm super passionate. I know everyone has gotten the email about the recent suicides that have been happening this year. And when I read it, I almost broke down in tears. I mean, I was tearing up, but I don't know, because that's something I've been working on, and I've also struggled with mental health in the past, and so it's something that's important to me. I worked on the Government Relations Council, and as they wrote up the legislation, other members of our team, and they worked with other schools from all the different councils on the other schools. And then my job was to take this legislation, which I was so proud and passionate about, and taking it to over, like I talked about, over 40 representatives and senators to get funding for not only our campus, but from the state funding to do that. So that's why the CAPS office is even here in the first place, is from people like on our team and other teams at the other universities to give the funding from the university so that we can have the CAPS office.
Thank you. We have time for one more.
This question is directed at Mr. Fogue. Based on your previous record of being kicked off of GRC for apparent disinterest and lack of respect for the position, as well as being let go of CHAS peer mentor, how do you expect to change your historical precedents when being in the USU president's office?
You have 2 minutes.
Ooh, low blow, as they call it. No, but thank you for asking about that. Yes, that did happen. And yes, I was kicked off of GRC for being late to 3 meetings. And honestly, I handled it poorly, and I was emotional about the situation. And that's because I didn't feel like I should be kicked off, and I was doing a lot of work. And a lot of the people on the team can testify that I was doing more work than they were, and that I was doing it. So I felt wrongly, and in that moment, I felt like my world was coming to pieces. But since then, I've done a lot of learning. I think that was a big learning experience. And if anyone feels like they're a president and a person who being president is someone who needs to be perfect, then that just adds to the elitist culture that's already on the 3rd floor of the TSC. Because we are not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And if you want someone's perfect, don't ask to vote for Lucas either. Because we've seen today in debate and in past that he's not perfect either. So one of the things that I want to say about that is that yes, I did make a mistake. Yes, I was late to those meetings, but it doesn't mean I didn't care. And it doesn't mean I didn't put in work. I was just in a stressful situation. I was overwhelmed, overrun, and way too many commitments. And so that being said, I've learned to take my schedule and realize, and that was a good learning moment because it was abrupt. It's kind of hard for me. I took that and evaluated, okay, what's important to me? Am I making a difference because I have too many commitments? And then what am I doing in these commitments that's actually making a difference? And that's actually what started me on the track to even be here today, was the moment I was kicked off of GRC.
Okay, thank you. And as promised, and again, that was our last audience question. I did receive a text message, don't know from who, of a question that was directed to both candidates. They will be sticking around, and you can ask them questions individually. That being said, we did promise that each candidate would be given 2 minutes to close the debate with a final statement that and address the USU student body one last time on an election-sanctioned platform. And so with that being said, oh, it's Jaron. Well, sorry, Jaron, we couldn't get to your question. But please reach out to the candidates. So with that being said, we'll start with Mr. Stevens, and you have 2 minutes to give a closing statement.
Well, thank you, Dexter. This has been so fun and so professional. I've really enjoyed this, and thank you to the Elections Committee for putting this on and running this election. I know it's just as stressful for y'all as it is for the candidates. And thank you for the student body. I know this can be a taxing experience with campaigning and emotionally, physically, and in a lot of different ways. So thank you. And I would just say that I really do love Utah State, and I love the students here. I love my peers. I am not better than anybody else. And I don't think that just because I've been a vice president that that means that I'm entitled to this position. But I do think that my experiences can help me be an effective professional advocate for each of you. And that's what I want to do ultimately, is I love students and I want to help us have the best experience possible. I'm going to be a senior next year, and I want to end my college experience on a high note. And I think that the student body president has a huge capacity to improve the student experience through sitting on the COVID boards and advocating for what's important to us, as well as disseminating the knowledge to students actually planning events so we can bring back our favorite events and traditions. We can do this. We can recreate the Aggie experience. We can make the Aggie family a reality. Again, I love Utah State. Lead with Lucas and go Aggies.
Thank you. Now we'll turn our attention to Mr. Folk for your closing 2 minutes.
Hey, thanks, Dixon. Honestly, for me, this has not been that fun. I feel like I'm going to throw up. It's very nerve-wracking. Maybe I should have thrown up. It would have ended earlier. No, I'm just kidding. One thing that I will say is that of everything that has happened to me at this university, I think it'd be selfish for me to not do anything to give back. And that's why, when I first came to Utah State, I applied to 6 different committees. After being involved in everything during the first week of school, I didn't make it into a single one. At first, I was blown away, and I see all these people that are on 5 or 6 committees, and be like, well, what the heck? Why can someone like me not get involved? But on the other hand, it was a good experience for me because it led me to get to unique opportunities for involvement. And that's where I've become Eric from schools, because I feel that as I've been able to be an RA and see the new students and help them through and mentor them in my time in Greek life and with the unit and being an advocate for them, and my time as a study abroad and doing student research, all those things I would not have been able to do or find out about them if I was not first not accepted to these committees. But second, admonished by the current president, Jaron, that everything that you do, everything that you fail at or you don't get in life, you have to work for and use that failure as a chance for success and a motivation to become better. And so everything that I've learned, I know that other students may not have a mentor like Jaron in that moment. And so for me, I want to give them a community. I want to give them places they can feel like they're not alone, and a better experience in college and more meaning to their life in general. So thank you. Vote Eric from school, Eric for school. Love you guys. USU, you're awesome.
All right, let's give a round of applause. Continue your round of applause for both candidates. Thank you, gentlemen. As one final reminder before we close the evening, you can still change your votes prior to the closing of the polls tomorrow. And that's at vote.usu.edu. Thank you all for being here. And, of course, go Aggies.